Ooh. Hey, how we doing today? Happy Wednesday, hump day. Woo, woo. How we doing? Drop your college recruiting questions down below. It's great to see all of you as always. I say see all of you. I know I can't see you, but you know what I mean. Drop your college recruiting questions down below. I hope you guys are having a wonderful Wednesday. It's been an awesome week. I hope you guys are staying warm. If you live out east, good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's great to see you. Drop your college recruiting questions down below. I'm going to try to get to as many of them as I possibly can. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good to see you, sir or ma'am. Good to see you all. Yeah, I hope you guys are staying warm. I know that there's been a bunch of snow and ice and stuff, and it's barely going away. So I hope you guys are staying safe. But yeah, drop your college recruiting questions down below. I'm going to try to get to as many of these as I possibly can. Okay. I've been on calls all morning, so I trying to gather it a little bit. All right, what do we got here? What do we got in the chat here? How can you get recruited in middle school? Remember, if you're in middle school, you're too early. You're not going to get recruited in middle school. You don't have to worry about that. Go enjoy the game. Enjoy whatever it is that you're doing. Enjoy the game. Develop as an athlete. So get better, improve your skills, get bigger, faster, stronger, learn to compete, those types of things. But in middle school, it's a little bit too early. What is the best place to email coaches? What does that mean? I mean, like, what platform is best? Is that what you mean? If so, I highly recommend using a Gmail account, like a normal Gmail account. Now, let's talk about this though, because there's a lot of other recruiting sites where you can send emails through there and that kind of thing. Some of them are fine, but I have seen a lot of data on some of those where the open rates, the click rates, et cetera, are significantly lower than a personal Gmail account. So that's why, like, all of our athletes, all our families use personal Gmail accounts, like 99% of them. And then there are some people who are like, oh no, if you use a personal Gmail account, you're going to go to spam. What you really need is like a custom domain. And then you got to set up DNS records. And if you're like, what the heck is that stuff? Yeah, you really don't need to do any of that. That's really for people who are sending like 10,000 emails a day, like businesses and stuff like that. In college recruiting, you don't need to do that. You can just use a Gmail account. And I highly recommend using a Gmail account. I think it's the easiest. It's the best. We haven't had any open rates, click rate problems, anything like that. So I highly recommend you just use a normal Gmail account. You don't need a separate one. You don't need to use a separate recruiting platform or anything like that. What are your thoughts on JUCO? So I'm a huge fan of JUCO. And I was actually a really big fan of JUCO before JUCO had a lot of hype, right? You had the kids who like got extra years of eligibility. It's like, oh, your JUCO years aren't going to count toward your 4 years, like that kind of thing. And JUCO got a ton of hype and everyone was like, JUCO's the best. I loved JUCO well before that because I went to JUCO. And so I'm a big fan of JUCO for a number of reasons. Here are the reasons why I think junior college is actually the bomb.com, and it's a great option for a lot of families. The first thing is that they have large rosters. So if you are struggling to get recruited, then you are more likely to get recruited by a JUCO because they have larger rosters. Okay. The second thing is that it's a great second chance spot where if you have bad grades or you didn't get a lot of playing time at a D1 or you just didn't really get recruited out of high school, it's the perfect place for people like that. Okay. The other thing is that you flip the recruiting process on its head and you actually get an advantage now. If you're a high school kid, you're competing against kids in the transfer portal, right? That's what's happening. And those kids are bigger, faster, stronger, etc. The transfer portal allows you to switch it where now you are on the side of being older and bigger and faster and stronger than high school athletes, period. Right. And so I think that it's a way of going through the transfer portal without going through the transfer portal, because for those who don't know, you don't have to actually enter the transfer portal as a junior college athlete, right? And so I love JUCO. I got way more interest out of JUCO than I did high school. That's also because we finally figured out how to get recruited in JUCO. But I'm a really big fan of JUCO. I think JUCO is amazing for a lot of families, and I think it's a really good option. And I'll also say this: JUCO has a stigma, like JUCO has a stigma, and people look down on it a lot of times. And I'll be honest, I did too. Like, I never thought that I would end up at a JUCO. I loved my JUCO experience. I thought it was going to be miserable. I thought that I wasn't going to enjoy it. I loved junior college. I thought it was awesome. I met amazing people. The culture was so great there. And you're like, culture at JUCO? Yes. The culture of my team was awesome. The people that I met, I still talk to them to this day. Like, I love JUCO. I think it's such a great option, and I think more people need to consider it. Can you please explain the 7-10 rule? Yeah, so the short version of the 7-10 rule is it has to do with academics and the core classes that you take, basically maths, sciences, those types of things. You just have to cross a certain number of academic requirements that you're basically competing, or that you have completing, not competing, completing. And that's essentially what the 7-10 rule says. There's a lot more. If you want like the really nitty gritty, you can a quick Google search and you'll get that. But it basically has to do with the academic requirements. For sending emails, what should I mention about myself? How do I make it unique and not too general? I'm going to challenge you on that. And I'm going to say that you actually don't need to make it unique. And you're probably like, how am I going to stand out in the inbox then, Jack? That doesn't make any sense. We've tested this a lot. Like hundreds of thousands of emails to college coaches. And it turns out that your initial emails don't actually have to be unique. They don't. Now, they should be unique in the sense that, like, while everyone else is sending really long emails, yours should be short, but you don't actually need to do anything to like super stand out in the inbox. The reality is that college coaches get hundreds of these things, hundreds of them. They're not reading every word in every single email. What they're doing, I'll tell you what they're doing. They see the position in grad class and go, yeah, I'm recruiting for that. They might gauge really quickly at like height, weight, if it's there, or city, state. And then they go straight to the video or the stats every single time. Everything else that you write there, if you write like an essay about your leadership skills and your game IQ and all these other things, it's not going to matter. They're not even going to read it. They might read it if they come back after seeing the video, but they're not even going to read it. And so the best thing that you can do is basically remove anything that makes the email long that's not necessary, and rather just make it super short so they jump straight to the video. You actually don't need to make your messages unique. And I talk about this in terms of like hyper personalization. Like, you'll get people who will say, well, you need to personalize the emails. In terms of like the coach's last name, yeah, you need to personalize those emails. But you don't need to write like a hyper personalized line where you're like, hey, coach, saw you were ACC coach of the year last year. It makes sense why that would help you. But the data says that it doesn't matter. And I know this because we used to do that. We used to write a personalized line for every single coach. So if there was like 100 schools in an email and we were contacting 3 coaches at each school, that's 300 coaches. We used to go through and write a personalized line for every single one of them. And we got great results. And I thought it was because of the personalization, until a family came along and they were like, hey, we're super late in the process. We got to get this out. And I was like, yeah, we're not going to have time to personalize this. And I said, but we still got to get it out. And the family said, that's all right. Let's just get the thing out. And they got a ton of responses. And I was like, they didn't personalize anything though. Okay. And we tested it again. Same thing happened. Ton of responses. And it turns out that personalization in your intro emails to college coaches does not impact results. Now, personalization becomes a much bigger deal as you get deeper into relationships with coaches. Personalization really matters there. But in terms of intro messages, personalization, making it unique, those types of things actually doesn't matter. If you are a parent who works in the corporate world and you're in business, you're probably like, that doesn't track in my brain, because you could never send an outreach email to somebody that wasn't personalized for whatever reason. I don't know why. I could speculate on why, but I don't know why. College recruiting is different, and you don't need to do that. And it is a waste of time and energy. That time and energy is better spent elsewhere. There are other things that affect responses more than that. Son's NAIA doing amazing. D1 schools already interested. Awesome. What should I be doing if my son's GPA is under a 3? Okay. Couple things that I would do. The first thing is just in terms of schools that I would contact. So there's like the recruiting piece and there's the like getting better grades piece. Okay. In terms of the recruiting piece, I highly recommend contacting like D2s, JUCOs, like other schools besides high academic D3s and really strong D1s and those types of things in terms of recruiting. Okay. It could be that he's got to go to a JUCO or something like that, and then he can get his grades up there and then transfer depending on how old your son is. Let's talk about the grades though. How do you get the grades up? I would encourage him to do this right here. Okay. I would encourage him to do this, which is be on time to every single class, sit in the front row, don't sit next to friends. If he does like those three things, you would be surprised how much grades can improve with just those three things. Are there other things? Of course, like doing homework and, helping them with that stuff. But like those three things, there have been studies that show that if you do those three things, your grades naturally go up by major percentage points. So I would have him show up to class on time, sit in the front row, and don't sit next to friends. And if he does those three things, which are very simple to do, if he does those three things, he will probably get better grades naturally. Naturally. What sports do you work with? 14 different sports at this point. Baseball, basketball, football, soccer, lacrosse, volleyball, softball, water polo, rugby, golf, tennis, hockey, track and field, women's flag football. Did I get all 14? I think I got all 14. Something like that. Men's and women's, we have 14 different sports at this point. We're not one specific sport. But we give individualized, personalized, like sport-specific advice for every single sport. Thoughts on JUCO for baseball? Yeah, I kind of already went into that. I love JUCO. I think JUCO is awesome, and think there's a lot of really good things about it. When building a relationship with a coach, what should you communicate about? It's a great question. Okay. So when you are following up with a coach who's already interested, when you say building a relationship, that's what that means. You've sent them something. They said, hey, kid actually looks pretty good. I think I'm interested. Now you are in the relationship building phase with that school. How do you continue to follow up without being annoying? The key here is to provide value in every single interaction. I'm going to explain what that means. Don't worry. But you have to provide value in every single interaction. And that means giving the coach things that help them do their job. Follow-ups are not for you. And this is why a lot of families mess up follow-ups, is because they're sending follow-ups. Why? Because they want coaches to respond to them, to make them feel good and reassure them that they're still interested. If you're sending follow-ups like that, you're going to be annoying and you're going to lose coaches. You have to send follow-ups for their benefit, not yours. Now, the interesting thing is when you do that, not only do they win, but you win. If you help a college coach win, you will win as well. Okay. So the follow-ups when it comes to that is if you don't have an offer from a school yet, they're not sure that your kid is good enough yet. So you should be providing evidence that helps them evaluate your kid further. Now there's 9 different types of evidence. Okay. So there's 9 different types of things that you should be sending in follow-ups to college coaches. But even from a very basic 101 standpoint, these would be things like video. They'd be things like stats or awards and accomplishments that come up, right? Like even those little things can be touch points. And what happens is over the course of many months, you share different pieces of evidence in multiple follow-ups, which gets you a lot of touch points with a college coach. They hear from you a lot. And it also builds the complete player because you're not just sending video. You're not just sending stats. You're sending things that complete the player, that they can see everything that they need to know, right? And so that's really what you're doing when you're building a relationship with a college coach is you are providing value to them. You are trying to make their life easier. When you do that, they are so much more likely to recruit you. We have a saying here, maybe you've heard it, the easier it is for a coach to recruit you, the more likely they are to. We've been saying that for like 2 years. It's the golden rule of college recruiting. Would you try to negotiate a scholarship offer if you think it's a bit low, or is that risky? No, I would do that. Now, it is risky in the sense that if you do it wrong, you can get the offer pulled entirely. But scholarship negotiation is definitely a real thing. I was just on an office hour call with the family this morning, like with one of our clients, and we talked about exactly how to do that and what that looks like. So that's a super common thing. And so, yes, you can absolutely negotiate a scholarship offer. The best way to do that is by having more than one scholarship offer, because then you can leverage offers. But there's even ways to negotiate that without having another offer, but you have to be really careful about how you do it. You got to have the right words there, because I've seen instances where a family will try to get more money, but they'll do it in a way that really pisses off the coach, and then they lose the offer entirely. Um, let's see. Do kids need to have an NCAA number? Yes, you will need to have an NCAA number unless you go NAIA, in which case you'll need an NAIA number. So it is something that's mandatory, but I think parents get really caught up on this and they're so worried that if they don't have it, everything's going to fall through. It's really not that hard to get these numbers. You don't need to do them. Like if you're a sophomore, you don't need to do it tomorrow. We've had kids who are second semester seniors get their number. Like it's just not that hard to get those numbers, but you will need it if you're going to go to an NCAA school. And if you're going to go to an NAIA school, you'll need an NAIA number. But my personal take on this is that if you go to like a showcase or something and they host a seminar for parents, this is one of the things that they'll mention the most. They'll talk about all these rules and stuff like that. The reason, this is in my opinion, that they'll do this is because they're very black and white and they don't require a lot of knowledge. You just simply have to look that up and then you can regurgitate that. And it sounds really important. And they don't often know strategy pieces to actually discuss in those seminars. So they give you an overview, they give you some black and white stuff that kind of scares you. Sounds like you got a lot of value from it. But the reality is like, that's such a small piece of the recruiting process. You can do that so easily. You can do it pretty late in the process, but at some point it is required and you will need to get it. And like I said, there's a different one for NCAA and NAIA because those are two different organizations. Oh, excuse me. Andrina, I hope I'm saying that right. I've seen you here on lives a few times. It's great to see you again. I hope that I'm saying that right. Daughter is young for her grade. Competition, beach volleyball are often 9 months older than her. Some have kind of plateaued, but she hasn't hit her peak. Should we share her birthday info, or will this work against her? The problem is that sharing the birthday info confirms that she's young, but it doesn't change the situation. Like she's not, by you saying that she's young, they're not going to automatically go, oh, okay, well, that changes everything. If she's young and you're going to reclass her, then that changes everything. But if you're just telling her that she's young and that's why she's having a hard time competing against bigger girls, like that kind of thing, the coaches are going to say, I totally get that. And that's really hard, but I still have to recruit like I normally would. And if you're in the same grad class as these other girls, I'm just going to take the girls that are more physically developed. So you saying what the birthday is will explain why she might be smaller sized, that kind of thing, but it probably won't change your recruiting situation unless you reclass. Does that make sense? So it totally, like, it makes sense why you're asking that, why you're thinking that, like all that for sure. But I don't know that that's going to change anything because again, they're just going to recruit based on the class. They're not necessarily going to recruit just because her birthday was a little bit young, right? Women's swimming. No, we've had water polo, but not swimming. But at some point, I played baseball and we've had 14 different sports. That means 13 people had to be a guinea pig for each one of those sports. So it has worked out well. So if you're interested, I'm okay with it. Can a kid reach out with emails their sophomore year? Yeah, totally. In fact, I recommend doing that. So typically what we'd say is that freshman year is for flexing the muscle is what we'd call it. And so flexing the muscle means you're sending some stuff freshman year, not because you think you're going to get an offer, but because you know that at some point you're going to have to send a lot of emails. You're going to have to make a lot of videos, do all that kind of stuff. And so you're like, let me just dip my toe in the water and try this out a little bit, right? Like, let me get used to sending an email. That's what we would say freshman year. Sophomore year is what we call building the foundation. This is building the foundation so that when you get to like the second half of sophomore year, which we're kind of in now, and then junior year, you're able to ramp up big time and really start contacting a lot of schools and getting a lot of exposure. And so, yes, you can definitely reach out sophomore year. I highly recommend that you do. And then the closer that you get to junior year, and specifically like summer before junior year, the more that you should be sending and the more you should be ramping up. So I wouldn't recommend, like we talk about contacting 100 schools, 3 coaches a school, 300 emails, like that kind of thing. I don't recommend waiting to do that until after your legal recruiting date. I would do that a few months before, because who are the coaches going to call on the legal recruiting date that they can start recruiting players? Who are they going to call? Well, all the players that they learned about and knew about before the legal recruiting date, even if they couldn't talk to them then. So they're building lists. They're figuring out who they're going to call on those days. And so I highly recommend starting well before those legal recruiting dates, which would constitute sophomore year, so that you can really build momentum going into summer and then into junior year. So yeah, I would absolutely send emails sophomore year. How soon do you think we should start the Instagram page, videos, and sending emails? So I think kind of similar thing, like freshman year, flex it, do a little bit of it just to dip your toe in the water. By second semester of sophomore year, so I'm saying 2028s, you're basically at the point now where you should be building your foundation. The latest that I would really start is probably like March, April. That's the latest if you're interested in Division I. And ramping up. I mean, just sending as much as you possibly can leading up into the summer. You should be full go at that point. And so I actually recommend that 28 start now and start building a video catalog, doing, making sure the profile is optimized on social media, doing all those things so that, you're doing all those in the next couple months. And then by the time that March and April hit, boom, you can start like heavy outreach, heavy exposure, heavy social media posting to get ready for the legal recruiting dates. So I would say like for 28s, now is a good time to start that whole process. I'm a sophomore sending emails, getting a lot of interest from D2 schools because obviously D1s can't write back yet. How do I know which ID camps to go to this summer for girls soccer? If we're talking about the D2 schools that you're getting a lot of interest from, then I would start with the schools that you are getting interest from. And if you're like, well, there's a lot of them because maybe there's 20 of them or something like that, right? And then you're like, well, I'm getting 20 D2 schools interested. I can't go to 20 camps. How would I make that decision from there? Then the answer is you're looking for two things: the most meaningful and the most frequent communication. Now, there are other factors, how much you like the school. Okay, you should go to camps for schools that you like, but how meaningful is the communication? Everyone's showing interest, but are some of them showing more interest than others? Okay, those are the camps that I would think about going to. And then frequent communication. Everyone's showing interest, but are some of them responding to you and more frequently communicating with you than others? Okay, those are the camps that I would also consider highly as well. So you can have interest, that's great, but there's levels of interest, right? Some are going to be more interested than others. Those are the schools I'd prioritize. And then I would also prioritize the schools that you are most interested in. For the D1 schools, you're mostly waiting until you can get real interest from them before making those decisions. Not to say there's not a reason to go to an event before that. There totally is. But that requires a much more in-depth answer. Would want to know what other events you're going to, schools you're interested in, like all those types of things. So again, that's going to require a different answer. But for the D2 schools, meaningful and frequent. That's what I would look at. As a freshman, what are some of the things you can do to start the recruiting process? So you're dipping your toe into the water of what you're going to be doing sophomore, junior, senior year. So freshman year, I would make a couple videos. I'd send a couple emails. And when I say a couple, I'd make 10 or 15 recruiting videos. I would send 10 or 20 emails to college coaches. I'd make 5 or 10 posts on social media, like small stuff, right? Like just dip your toe in the water over the course of 12 months. We're talking about that stuff. That's not that much for 12 months. So I would dip your toe in the water with that stuff, just kind of get used to it. And then sophomore, junior year, you can ramp up. The other thing I'm going to say is as a freshman, huge prioritization of development, bigger, faster, stronger, your skills, your techniques, those types of things, really big deal. It's a really big deal. Yes, right. Thanks. You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Are we at a disadvantage if we didn't start the reaching out until beginning of junior year? It kind of depends on your sport and it depends on the goals of the athlete. If the goals of the athlete are D1, then you are at a bit of a disadvantage. That's not to say you can't go D1. That's definitely not what I'm saying. You definitely could if your kid was talented enough. But to say that you'd have an advantage by starting later would not be accurate. You're at a disadvantage in that case. But if you're more interested in like lower level schools, then it's really not that big of a deal. So I always tell families, and mostly just because I hear this from other families. They're like, man, I wish we had started earlier. That's what everybody says. I've met a lot of families that wish they started earlier. I've never met a single family that regretted starting early. And so are you at a disadvantage? Probably. Is it a deal breaker? Absolutely not. Go get D1 interest. Like, absolutely not. Instagram or X for exposure, or both. So this is going to really depend on your sport. Some sports, Twitter is going to be more important. Some sports, Instagram is going to be more important. We typically say, like, it's obviously best to be on all of them. The more platforms you're on, the more exposure you can get. We found this in the recruiting trends report. So you can download that report. It's completely free. d1scholarship.com/2026. At the end of 2025, we did a study of over 8,000 athletes to figure out how they were getting recruited. And what we found is that athletes who were on multiple platforms like Twitter and Instagram and sending emails, those families got 59% more interest. That's huge. That's so much more interest. And so it's best if you can be on multiple platforms, but it's highly likely that for your sport, one platform is going to be more important than another, right? Like if you play football, Twitter is going to be more important than Instagram. If your kid plays, I don't know, women's soccer, then Instagram's probably going to be more important than Twitter for you. Is that to say there aren't women's soccer coaches on Twitter? No, there definitely are. There's just probably more of them on Instagram. And even more of them, you're probably to get more responses on email for that sport. So it depends on the sport specific, like whatever your sport is. Like I said, we've had 14 different sports, but we don't treat them all the same. You have to treat them differently because each sport is unique. Right. So there's principles that apply to all of them, but then there's little idiosyncrasies and nuances to each one. And you just kind of got to know what those are. So I would need to know your sport to know whether Instagram or X is going to be better for exposure. Also, let's call it Twitter. Let's call it Twitter. I don't care what Elon says. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. You're welcome as well. Thanks for being here. Do videos need to be professional? No. They don't. You don't need Hollywood level production quality. You really don't. You can take most of the videos yourself from an iPhone. You can also grab them from a platform like, if your school records them and they're on Huddle or Veo or Trace or something like that, your program, your club records them. All of that video is totally fair game. We use it all the time. Here's the biggest thing when it comes to like video quality like that. You just have to be able to see what's happening. Like a coach has to be able to evaluate the player on the screen. If the player is this tiny little ant and they're super far away, there's probably not a lot of evaluation that can happen. That's not worth it. But you don't need like a really fancy camera. You don't need to go hire someone professional to do it. Like you really don't need that. You just need to be able to see what's happening on the screen so a coach can evaluate the player. That's really all you need. I mean, I got more than a dozen D1 offers committed to Mississippi State. Every single video we took was with an iPhone. And that was 10 years ago when phones were not even close to as good as they are now. And so like that difference between an iPhone camera and a fancy camera is really not that different anymore. You can 100% use your phone. You don't need a fancy camera. You don't need to hire somebody. Yeah, you can absolutely do that. But they don't need to be professional, to answer your question. No. If coaches, recruiters are unable to talk to 28s, how are some able to get offers and school visits? What's the best place to find the details on all these rules? There's a couple things here. Okay. One is don't believe all the offers that you see. Many of the quote unquote offers for 28s and stuff are not real. Okay. There have been, I'll give you an example because people will look at those websites where like it'll have all the commitments or something like that. We've literally had players get posted on there saying so-and-so offered them. And they're like, no, they didn't, Jack. Or so-and-so committed to the school. And they're like, Jack, I didn't commit there. We got an offer, but we didn't commit there. Like that's happened. So you can't trust those sites. You can't trust people who are saying stuff on social media. A lot of the offers that are given as 28s won't even be there in a couple of years. There's other ways that they can give offers like that. Like they can give it, for instance, through a high school coach or something. So they'll call the coach and then they can sort of like pass the offer on to the athlete, which is technically legal, but it's a gray area. The biggest thing I'd say is I really wouldn't worry about offers as a 28. The majority of them are fake and going to fizzle out and not important. And a lot of those kids, even if they're real, are going to end up decommitting anyway later. Like I think I wouldn't worry too much about that. I'd worry about putting yourself in a good position for the legal recruiting date when you can actually start getting interest. What about swimming? There's somewhere it's just like if you say what about swimming and then another one is volleyball question mark, like what does that mean? Are you asking sports that we work with? Or are you asking about specific social media platforms? Or like you got to help me out there. Help me out there. Baseball. I still call it Twitter. It's Twitter. I don't care what anybody says. It's Twitter. Uh, you know, I don't know. How many of you think that it's X? Does anybody really like it's X? I feel like everybody still calls it Twitter. And I just, if I have to write something official, I'll put Twitter in parentheses X to make sure everybody understands, but I call it Twitter. We call it Twitter. It's Twitter. Platforms for volleyball, Instagram. Platforms good for swimming. Swimming's tough because it's a time-based sport. So video is important because they're going to want to see like form, but your times are going to be the most important thing. And so because of that, there's like less of an emphasis on swimming. Swimming is a lot of email from what I understand. Swimming is a lot of email. Of the 14 sports that we've had, swimming is not one of them. But yeah, I'm betting email and I'm betting a lot of stats and data is probably the move for you. Like you can, and you want to use social media. And so I would say if it's men's swimming, then I would do Twitter. If it's women's swimming, I would do Instagram. For social media, most women's sports are on Instagram. Like that's where you're going to get more social media activity. There are some exceptions. Softball is an exception. It's very Twitter heavy. So yeah. Is there a place or database available to families so we know what scam versus reality when it comes to recruiting services and camps? That's a great question. Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. Here's how I would evaluate a recruiting service. Because we basically run one. Here's how I would evaluate one if I had a kid and I wanted to make sure that it was going to be worth it. The first thing is, do you get value from their free content? If you don't get value from them before you give them a dime, you're definitely not getting value from them after you give them money. So the first thing that I would do is, are you getting value from their free content? If the answer to that is yes, then the second question is, okay, how many testimonials do they have? Okay. And when I say testimonials, keep in mind, I mean quality testimonials. What does that mean? It means it's not just typed out, but there's actual like videos with families who are talking about the service, or there's screenshots of messages, right? Like that's a different kind of thing. If you're like, what is that? What does that look like? Let me show you. Let me show you an example. Okay. Here, hold on. Okay. So we're here and then share. Like this is what you should be looking for. Okay. So this is like our accelerator page. So our main core program, like this is the page. Okay. Here's what you can see. First of all, let's just look at quantity of testimonials. Okay. So here's all these videos with families. And then these are all like testimonials of people with results, praise, etc. Like, and I could just keep scrolling. Like it just keeps going, right? So there's a lot of quantity, but also look at the quality. It's not just typed out, right? You can actually see, where are we here? These are full interviews with families. This one is 38 minutes long. Like you can literally go see exactly what families are saying and what they're experiencing. And there's a lot of them. This is hours and hours and hours of interviews here. And then every single one of these is a screenshot of exactly what the family said. It's not like I went in and typed this out and you're like, gotta trust me. It's like, no, this is the exact message. You can see it for yourself. So I highly recommend that is what you look for when you are evaluating a recruiting service of some kind, is like, keep your standard high. Like if they don't have that, then they're probably not that good. I don't know how else to say that. Like probably not that good, And so I would look for those things. I think it's super important. And I'm really big on helping families identify what's a good service versus not a good service, because there are 1,000 of them and they all look the same and they are not all the same. Although a lot of them are tough, but yeah. Do YouTube videos, vlogs count for swimming? Vlogs. What is a vlog for swimming? Um, In terms of YouTube videos, yes. So I'll tell you like what I would do. If I were you and you're a swimmer, I would put all of your clips of swimming on a YouTube channel and I would send them via email and then I would natively post them. I think you said women swimming. And then I would natively post them to Instagram. So they should be in multiple places, not just one. And so something like YouTube, you're using specifically for email, and then you're posting those videos natively to social media for social media. Different platforms have different purposes in the recruiting process. The problem becomes when you try to use it for everything and it's like, but that's not how it was designed to be used, right? Um, Recruiting services put me in actual contact with 3 coaches. Awesome. I would encourage you to go get more than 3, but that's awesome. Soccer platforms, social and which? So soccer, usually it's Instagram, um, email men's. Yeah. So soccer is primarily email and Instagram. Primarily. Thank you. You're welcome. Excellent advice. Thank you. What about camp and combine invites? Any advice on how to decipher scam for money as opposed to the real deal and will help build the athlete and their relationships? Yeah, here's exactly how I would think about this. Don't look at how big an event is or how small an event is. Rather, generate a lot of interest from college coaches directly, meaning either through outreach, emails or DMs, or through social media content or whatever it is. Generate real conversations first, and then go to the events for the schools that you're talking to. Because now when you show up to one of those events and there's 100 girls there, right? They're watching how many of them? Probably 5. Probably 5. The other 95 are, and this is kind of a tough term, but the other 95 are wallpaper. They're not actually being recruited. And so they just watch the 5 that they've already talked to, they've already seen video of, maybe that they've already talked to on the phone, like those types of things. That's who they're really recruiting and looking at. And so you have an advantage over the other 99 players or 95 players when you show up if you're already in contact with them. So I would not choose a single event, and take this from somebody who went to like dozens of these events. Like in high school, we spent a lot of money, tens of thousands of dollars, going to events all over the country because we thought that's how I was going to get recruited. I was a pretty good player. Didn't work. Why? Because all those coaches were watching players they already knew. This is what people miss. Coaches don't go to events to discover new players. They go to events to evaluate players they already know about. And if they happen to discover a player, all the more great. But that's not why they go to the event. They go to the event to evaluate players that they've already seen video of, that they've already talked to, and confirm that what they saw on video is the real deal in person. And so I would, if I'm you, not go to an event. There are other reasons, by the way, to go to an event besides exposure or evaluation or something like that. There are other reasons, but the primary like use case is that. And instead, if I'm you, I go contact a lot of schools, start as many conversations as I possibly can. And then the only camps that I'm going to are ones where those schools will be there. And this is the other thing that a lot of people miss. If you're in communication with the school, why can't you just say, hey, I'm thinking about going to XYZ event. Are you planning on being there? Why is it not in the coach's best interest to tell you that? They're going to be like, oh, I'll be there. I hope you are too, because then they don't have to try to get you to their camp. They don't have to go out of their way. They're like, oh, yeah, I'm already going to that event. I'd love for you to come there. It's another player I'll get to see. And so you can straight up ask coaches, hey, you planning on being at that event? But that only happens if you're already in communication with them. So if you want to save thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars, just do that. Contact schools first, start conversations, go to the camps and showcases where the schools you're already talking to will be in attendance. Just saved you $10,000. Thank you. You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Junior 27 class, have a recruiter for a year now, gotten me 3 telephone calls, D1 coaches, 1 leading to an offer. Is that ahead of the average? What motivates them to get more? I'm not going to speak on whether that's ahead of the average or behind the average, but I would highly encourage you to get more. What motivates them to get more? To be real with you, they don't really have a motivation to get you more. They probably just want you to commit, if we're being real. So that's why it's really important to be with somebody that you trust, because they'll continue to fight for you even when, and like really help you even when you already have an offer. They're not just trying to offload you so they can go focus on other athletes, right? So that's why it's really critical. But I'm not going to discuss whether that's like one offer is ahead of the average or behind the average. Here's what I'll say. 7% of high school athletes play college sports. 2% earn a scholarship. You got an offer? Congratulations. You're in the 2%. That's awesome. That's awesome. That's great. All right, guys. Any other questions before we hop? Anything else? My throat is killing me. I got to go get some water. This is basically out. Going once. Oh, that's what I thought. Thanks. Yep. Going twice. Sold. Awesome. Guys, thanks for being here. Thank you. Appreciate your help. Yeah, you got it. Thanks for being here. We do this every day, 1 p.m. Eastern, Monday to Friday. So we're going to be here tomorrow again. If you got more questions, come back. Come hang out. We'll be here 1 p.m. Eastern. Thank you guys for being here. Hope you guys have a wonderful Wednesday, and I will see you guys tomorrow.